Hi golfers, Rob Cheney here from GOLFTEC Singapore. In this week's video I'm going to discuss one of the most sought after positions in the golf swing, one that many amateur golfers strive to achieve but struggle so greatly to do so. It's about learning how to have some shaft lean at impact. So in today's video I'm going to use the GOLFTEC motion measurement system and reference their swing true motion study, which discusses the importance of shoulder tilt at impact. And I'm really going to come back round and talk about how achieving shaft lean at impact, which as I say is one of the pots of gold that many amateur golfers are looking for and searching for. They're looking for a particular look or desired position, but without a full understanding of how the body needs to move to be able to match those alignments at impact. So whilst you might look at the best ball strikers and see how they have the shaft leaning forward when they make contact with the golf ball, you may not fully understand or appreciate how the body needs to move in order to support that. Today's video was inspired, as so many of them are, by the day-to-day lessons I give in the Bay at GOLFTEC, the hundreds of lessons I give every single month, and the trouble and the struggles that golfers of all abilities have. This one comes up frequently. I've done previous videos discussing the forward shaft lean and the right forearm flying wedge. You can check those out here. But if you're new to the channel, please do hit that subscribe button. I also want to give a shout out to my friend and colleague Michael Bygraves at GOLFTEC in Hong Kong. He did a video this week which really kind of added to my inspiration and desire to shoot this one. So if you haven't already checked out Mike's channel, go and give him a look and give him a subscribe. So we've made it onto the mat. Now it's time to discuss forward shaft lean, what creates it, how we can achieve it. Maybe before we do that, we might want to discuss briefly why we would want to have it. It might look nice, but what's it actually doing? Well, having the shaft leaning slightly forward at impact allows a few things to happen. It encourages the golfer to hit the ball first and the ground second. You should know by now, if you've watched enough of my videos, that making solid contact is the first fundamental to playing good golf. So ball first, ground second contact matters, and having the shaft leaning slightly forwards when you make contact with the ball allows you to do that because it's delaying the radius of the swing reaching its widest condition too soon. And I suppose said another way, that would be the golfer who does struggle with contact, having the radius reach its inline condition too early before the ball. That's when we start to see the flipping and the scooping, and that's when contact issues arise. So the first thing it allows you to do is make better contact, and that's got to be a good thing. The second thing that it helps with is giving you a downward angle of attack. With an iron swing and a fairway shot, we certainly want the club head to be traveling slightly downwards when we make contact. Varies slightly from club to club, and it certainly varies slightly depending on the shot you're trying to hit, but the angle of attack should certainly be downwards with a fairway shot. And I all too often see golfers struggling with contact because their angle of attack is upwards. The club head has already reached that inline condition. As I said, the radius has reached its widest point, and from that point onwards, as the club head overtakes the hands, the club's beginning to ascend too early. So having the forward shaft lean helps with contact from both a strike point of view in terms of hitting the ball first and the ground second, and that's also helped by having a slightly downward angle of attack. The third thing it helps you with is delivering less dynamic loft. So effectively what I'm saying is when you make contact with the golf ball with the shaft slightly forward, you're presenting slightly less loft to the golf ball than you would do if you presented the shaft leaning backwards. Why does that matter? Well, distance certainly contributes towards hitting the ball further if you're able to swing fast enough. So having less dynamic loft as you make contact helps you to hit the ball farther. And a fourth thing that this helps with is to hit outwards for longer. Basically swing slightly more into out for longer as the shaft is leaning forwards. And once again, that's because as we're swinging on this arc, by hitting the golf ball first before the club has lined up with the swing center, we have a draw or an into-out swing path built into the swing. I've spoken about that again in plenty of other videos. The draw is built into the swing, and if you're able to maintain the forward shaft lean that you have at setup, you're maintaining the outward path, which is helping you, making it more likely that you can hit a draw. So those are some valid reasons why we'd want to do this. Let's get into the nuts and bolts of how to do it. Okay, we've hit one. Let's jump on the computer and have a little look at what I did there to achieve that. So I hit one shot there, nice solid 7-iron push draw, went about 160 yards, pretty standard. We've come back to the screen here. I'm going to walk you through some of the numbers that you may or may not be familiar with, but try and help you to understand how the body needs to move in order to achieve the shaft lean that we so desire. So as I pull you onto the screen here, the first thing I'm going to point out on the left-hand side is the GOLFTEC Swing True Motion study, which talked about a number of relevant and important positions in the golf swing, and this one talks about shoulder tilt at impact, and it works through from the highest handicappers in the bottom left-hand corner of this graph as having the least amount of rightward shoulder tilt at impact, all the way up through to the professional golfer who would have the most, up at 39 degrees. And if I pull out onto the screen the shoulder tilt, my shoulder tilt and hip tilt number at P1, I'm showing 20 degrees of rightward tilt with my shoulders. We'll do this in yellow, it's a little bit easier to see. So this is like 20 degrees of rightward tilt, and my hips are basically level, 1 degree of left tilt. So that's how I've started. But what we're going to see, and this is really the purpose of today's video, is to help you to notice and understand the differences in the body motion between setup and impact, how different they are, and how they affect your ability or not to keep the shaft lean that you desire at impact. So as I move into impact, we're going to see, as I've just made contact with the ball, my shoulder tilt has moved to 39 degrees to the right. So if we draw that in loosely, you can see how there's more tilt in my shoulders visually in 2D, and also we can measure that in 3D here at GOLFTEC. And equally, my hips have gone from a 1 degree leftward tilt to a 13 degree rightward tilt. So they've increased their tilt as well. Doing that has allowed me to keep my shaft lean more or less intact. I've got a little bit of shaft lean in the frame before impact, and then as I hit the ball, my left arm and shaft kind of line up. And that's really been the way I've always played. I've never been someone who had a extreme or high amount of shaft lean at impact. But as long as I have a little bit, I know I'm encouraging the things that I was discussing earlier, the good contact, the hitting down, the hitting out. You know, those are the things that are really important and the reason why we strive to have this look at impact. So in one swing there, I've managed to demonstrate the principles of good motion into impact and why tilting appropriately like this helps you to keep the shaft lean. The other pieces of the puzzle that help as well, just going to bring those out onto the screen for you because you may not be so familiar with those. As I'm tilting more, I'm also opening my shoulder turn and my hip turn far more than they were at setup as well. So at setup, my shoulders were 18 degrees open and my hips were 10 degrees open. And by the time I've hit the ball, I've got 36 degrees open with my shoulders. That's 18 degrees more open. I've doubled the amount my shoulders are open. And I've now got 30 degrees of open hip turn. That's 20 degrees more than I had at setup. So it's not simply a case of do I just slide my hips or do I just turn them. I think this starts to show you how there's a blend of tilt, which is slide or sway, and turn. And here on the screen is a real life, everyday version that I deal with at GOLFTEC. This player struggles with contact, hits the ground behind the ball a lot with his irons, really struggles to maintain that shaft lean, gets the club and the left arm lining up way before impact, and then has that radius too wide and hits the ground. So we're working on trying to help him to do better at that. And one of the things we talked about in a recent lesson, which I'm going to share with you right here, is how he needs to move his body differently to enable him to get those wrist angles and that shaft lean that he's looking for. So if we take a look at his before swing on the left, it actually sets up with a little bit too much left tilt in his hips to begin with. But if we take that through to impact, we're going to see a couple of things. So first of all, we're going to see the breakdown in the left arm and shaft. Okay, so we're flipping already, we're scooping. He hits behind the ball here. If you look at the mat, you see how the mat changes color there. before he's actually made contact with the ball, so he's hit it fat. And if we look at his motion measurement at impact, he's only got 16 degrees of rightward tilt, which we know is not enough, and he's only got 4 degrees of hip tilt, which again is not going to work. It's not going to allow him to have the wrist angles that he's looking for. So as we worked on some changes, we encouraged more tilt at impact, also built a little bit more of that into his setup. So he's now got 21 degrees of rightward tilt at setup and 4 degrees of rightward tilt at setup on the right hand side. That's different to his left tilt that he had there on the left. And as we take our guy through here to impact on the right hand side, we're going to see some nice improvements. We're going to see an increase in that shoulder tilt now, 32 degrees at impact, which is much more sufficient in terms of what we're trying to achieve. And equally now those hips are 13 degrees to the right. We've turned him into that green, more PGA Tour average motion. We'll just compare that to the left-hand picture again. We'll see that there's visually difference in the tilts. There's also the three-dimensional measurement that we're using here at GOLFTEC. There's also some changes to those tilts. And we'll also see, if we come back to impact on the left-hand side, right-hand side, if we just come back a couple of frames, you'll start to appreciate how much better he's able to maintain the shaft lean, or the forearm, the right forearm flying wedge that we've spoken about in previous videos. He's able to maintain that much, much better, and as a result, start to hit the ground in a better place. So he's actually making better contact here through these shots, through this swing on the right, versus what he was struggling with historically, and very often struggles with on the golf course. He's hitting behind the ball, which is what he was doing on the left. So I hope those explanations and demonstrations there showed how the body motion and how we move affects our ability to have or not have the shaft lean. My guy that I showed you previously, because he didn't tilt and move appropriately, had to dump these wrist angles very early and ended up hitting the ground behind the ball very, very often. Now, you may not be fortunate enough to have access to a coach who uses 3D. You may not have a GOLFTEC center near you that you can get to. If you do, I highly encourage you to seek it out. Measuring is so much better than guessing. But if you don't have access to 3D and you still wanted to try and improve and your ability to get the shaft lean that you so desire, I would tell you to make use of these very basic but very useful alignment sticks. I've got one here across my chest. I'm using the shoulder strap here to keep it in place. And I've got another stick, the orange one, going through my belt loops to give you some visual representation and guidance here for the tilts. So we already know when we set up, we want to have a small amount of right tilt with our shoulders. That's partly because the hands are already forward. It's also because my hips are slightly forwards. And then there's a very small amount of tilt in the hips as well. But by the time we get to impact, we've just seen that the hip tilt number is going to increase to around 12, 13 degrees, and the shoulder tilt number wants to get up towards 39 degrees. So you can just use the visual, maybe stand in front of a mirror and practice that feeling of tilting more, and as you do so, opening your shoulder turn and your hip turn more than it was. And then, as always, you can make small practice swings where you really try to encourage and feel those extra motion, which is likely to be for most of you, where you're really tilting more, keeping the wrist bent and keeping the shaft lean in place. And then, of course, we can hit some small swings with our sticks in place. We're going to just practice chip in or punching the ball out there and getting better contact. So I hope that helps. I hope that helps you to start to understand why shaft lean is important. You may have already been trying to do it, but what motion and movements you need to make sure you're able to do it. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. I hope you found the content informative and educational. If you don't already, please hit that subscribe button and join the community here that we have between myself, Nick, and Jonathan at GOLFTEC Singapore. We're trying to create as much interesting and informative content for you to help you improve your game. Until next time, guys, I hope you have a great week, manage to play some golf, stay safe out there. I'll see you on another video very soon.